Quick note before we begin. Since recording this conversation, Veronika Lovett has moved into a new role as Chief Executive Officer at Kroo Bank. We recorded this episode while she was in her previous position, but the insights and experiences she shares are just as relevant. Now, let's get into the conversation.
Hi, Veronika. Thank you for joining me today for our Women Who Make It Happen series.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure and an honour to have been asked, so thank you.
You're welcome. Would you be able to introduce yourself and a little bit about your career to date?
Sure, I'll try and keep it short. So, Veronika Lovett. I am the Silver Rock CEO and GB Group Chief Strategy Officer. My background is banking through and through. I actually started my career on a grad scheme in RBS. I didn't actually want to go into banking, ironically. I was tossing up between doing that or marketing, and joined RBS for not the most strongest of reasons. They had a fantastic office and they promised to give me a very diverse graduate scheme. So I joined thinking that I would be there for about a year and then move on to something far more interesting, and found myself working in the bank for the best part of 16 years. Mm-hmm. And I moved around a lot. I spent over a decade in structured finance, looking at leverage transactions, non-sector specific. So did quite a lot in the retail space, the tech space, before I then specialised in the financial institution space. Looked at a lot of sort of fund deals, insurance and reinsurance, before I then looked at asset-backed finance lending. And then after a decade of looking at sort of structuring, so supporting the origination, execution, and then ongoing management of loans from ticket sizes of about 10 million right through to pre-securitization levels, I decided I never wanted to structure again, but I wanted to do something fundamentally different. And I was really fortunate to get approached to look at a project that was essentially trying to ascertain why was NatWest losing a significant number of customers to non-bank lenders and alternative lenders, particularly across the SME sector? And what started as a come and look at a bit of a sort of tech change product project under the NatWest banner very quickly became an opportunity to pitch a concept into NatWest to say, actually, if you want to move really quickly and you really want to test concepts, technology, functionality, the best thing for you to do right now is to set up a separate entity under a separate brand and spin out essentially a challenger business, which became to be known as Esme Loans. Yeah. So I was the CCO of that, Chief Commercial Officer for quite a few years, and took that from a blank piece of paper through to 150 million plus balance sheet. And that's when I really cut into what does it actually take to work in a startup environment? Mm-hmm. What does it really mean to take an idea right through to reality, to really grow a team and a culture and a business proposition, and actually realize how difficult it is to be on the day-to-day. So I was, previously I'd spent a decade structuring to support, issuance of money to these businesses. And now I really had a far better appreciation of what the challenges were when you were actually the lender yourself in that type of environment. Absolutely loved it. Arguably it was one of the best things I did up until that point. And then unfortunately COVID hit, various different strategic changes, and we ended up essentially winding that business down. Yeah. And that was my real moment to go, what would I like to do? Do I want to stay working in a large corporate, as fantastic as it had been? Once you sort of get a taste for being in a more innovative, more entrepreneurial environment, I decided to I would take the leap and look for something else and consider something else. And I genuinely thought I'd go off and spend 6 months sitting on a beach, pondering life, come up with a fantastic idea, launch my own business. But 5 weeks later, I was building a bank and developing a bank license application. Again, wasn't something that I necessarily thought I would do. And if someone would ask me what you would do when I was leaving university, I certainly would have said that I would be applying for a bank license to launch a bank. That's what I found myself doing. And over the last couple of years, I've been working in sort of the design, the development, and the subsequent launch of new banks.
Can I just come back right to the beginning where you said you didn't expect to be in banking? Yeah. It was that or marketing. What kind of kept you going, or where did that initial motivation come from to keep going with the RBS?
So, to be fair, the graduate scheme was, again, not something I ever thought I'd say. It was genuinely very interesting. And what really opened my eyes, and this still remains a bit of a challenge with respect to attracting people into financial services and banking, is actually how diverse your career opportunities are.
Yeah.
And what the reality is of working in a bank. I think at times there's a perception that it's just number crunching and a very tough male-dominated environment. And to some aspects, there is a degree of truth in that. But there's actually such a broad opportunity to really, I spent such a huge amount of time getting to understand how lots of other different types of businesses operated and what that meant, and got involved in working with lots of different management teams and the teams that were supporting them to understand how they were building out their businesses and driving their businesses, whether it was a large corporate or a smaller end sort of type of entity. And so that's what really kept me in banking. And I never actually, once I joined and I rolled off the grad scheme, I never really looked back to think, actually, I do want to go back into marketing. And I think, being brutally honest, marketing just seemed a little bit more exciting at the time. There was no real logic behind that, again. But what I found is that I was learning a lot at a really rapid pace, and I've always been very driven in an environment that gives me that earning potential. And being in a place where you are always solving problems, picking up new skills, seeing new challenges is what's always driven me to, I guess, end up in the career path that I have.
Yeah. Where did that drive come from? Because it's clearly innate in you. So,
I'm originally Eastern European. I'm half Russian, half Ukrainian. It sounds slightly controversial at these times. I was born at the time of the USSR, so I was brought up by very hard-working parents. And when we moved, I guess I saw my father go, change careers and make a phenomenal success in what he did. And that really inspired me.
Yeah.
And I've always had, I guess, a personal drive that if I've come over from a different country, and if my parents have sort of supported me, it's almost my giving back. That I will achieve success. And obviously success means different things to different people.
Yeah.
But for me, it was to ensure that I can leverage all the opportunities that UK and London in particular can bring. And I'm never one to stand still. And I think that's just, I don't know, just a natural character. I think my family and friends will say it's always the most positive trait of me, because I genuinely cannot sit still.
I would take that as a good thing. I look at that as a positive, quite frankly. I'm very similar. I think if I tend to sit still, I get bored. So there's always something I need to be doing. Your parents were clearly role models for you then, aspiring to be like them, and the hard work clearly rubbing off, the driven nature. Any other role models, personally or professionally, actually, that have maybe helped to shape you in your career?
I probably would say I never sort of had any singular or multiple role models as such. I remember looking around when I was younger and actually seeing that there wasn't really anyone in a role or job that I was necessarily aspiring to at the time, to be honest. But I always looked at those individuals and thought, surely they don't have a particular secret sauce that can't be learned in some way, shape or form. So I've never sort of looked at myself as someone that necessarily had any particular fantastic gift, but I thought you can learn, you can self-teach, you can use the network that you have around you. So actually that is what pushed me to look around and go, right, actually, what do I like and what do I see in traits, characters, leadership styles, or even find fascinating in career journeys, not just across FS, but from a wider perspective. And the single trait that I've picked up is people shapeshift a lot. They don't stand still and they follow a lot with their guts. And I mean, if you ever read any autobiography or listen to any podcast of, really phenomenal leaders, they will always say, you can look at data, you can look at analytics, but actually you have to have a vision, you have to stand behind your vision, you have to follow your gut, and you have to first and foremost believe in yourself.
Yeah. Very interesting points there, Veronika. There's quite a lot there that I want to delve into in separate ones. Can I just come on to you mentioned traits and leadership style. So learning from people maybe before or understanding that shape-shifting, I think that's quite a good term actually. What would you say your approach is? So your character traits that have led you to be successful and then your leadership style.
Yeah, so you're probably picking up that I'm a fairly direct person. And actually, over the last couple of years, it's been thinking about how I adapt that directness to ultimately what am I trying to achieve, right? And when I have a vision and that desire to bring that vision to life, what is vital for me is to ensure that I can translate that vision to a very broad audience base and inspire other people around me to buy into the vision and deliver against it. And a lot of the times, particularly working in whether it's financial services, but in startup, earlier stage businesses, it takes a lot of hard graft, dedication, and at times hard work beyond the norm and beyond the kind of the bare expectation that you expect. So it's how do you encourage people to do that without necessarily promising them to, all the riches of this world. It's through that, a lot for me has been around how do I make sure that I can connect with that diverse set of individuals and ensure that actually it's not just about my vision. It's through the journey, everybody around is developing and it's about nurturing them and getting them to where they need to be. So I find that successful leaders are those that can align the business, mission, vision very seamlessly with the individuals and their personal development plans and aspirations. And when the two are in sync, you will have a highly performing and highly collaborative team.
Yeah. And interesting, I completely agree with you. It's come up a few times actually. How do you, again, just everybody's managed individually, like bringing out the best in people can be very subjective, individualistic. How do you get them all on board with that vision, mission of yours, so you're all singing from the same hymn sheet?
It's a great question. It's probably fair to say you don't always get it right. Sometimes it takes, several sort of segues into it, because like you say, some people can interpret what you're saying differently. Some people will have a different vision. Not everybody is going to necessarily agree with the direction of travel. Or even if people buy into the vision, they might not agree with the journey that you're sort of trying to take. So to be fair, I think a lot of it is a chemistry-led personal negotiation, right? Which is ensuring that individual personally understands what it is that the business is trying to achieve, and why we're trying to achieve it, and also why does that actually directly pull on them. And for some people, it might not just be about personal development. It might be about driving change, driving a social economic impact. It might be in the product set that you're trying to deliver and the impact that has and the positivity that brings. And for some people, it might actually be this is a stepping stone that's going to get them to a different place.
I think that's it. It can take a few trials and errors, like you said, a few segues sometimes of it will mean different things for different people. But also, I think it's important that you touched on diversity, of having maybe that diversity of thought almost that enables you to come to solutions and really understand how you're going to go on that journey and what the end goal or product might be. You mentioned it earlier about diverse. So how do you go about ensuring that for your team, or clearly the business that you've been a major kind of impact on? So what do you do personally within Silver Rock?
So arguably when you're working in earlier stage businesses, I think you have the luxury of designing the culture and setting the tone from the culture. And that means sort of top down, you can really push what are the key values that you hold and that you would like to see everybody to get behind. Yeah. And in order to get those right, to ensure that you can get that performing collaborative team that is thinking on a 360 view of opportunities, risks, and solutions, you need that diversity of thought. So I guess up until, in the last couple of years, I've been in that fortunate stage to be in the driving seat to either influence or design and then subsequently instill the fundamental culture limbs to drive that diversity. Do I think I've got it right every time? No. Do I think there are some systematic problems that you sort of bump into in terms of, we can all say that we want to hire diverse teams, but actually when you go to recruit the teams at various different levels, you can get very different pools of candidates, no matter how hard you try. At the more junior level, to get that diversity across the full spread of ethnicity, culture, gender is easier than as you start to go through the ranks and as you start to look at more senior roles, which is actually sort of where you really want to see that more of that diversity, I would say. I've definitely not seen as much, and it's not as easy to find, and it's not, and ultimately you do hit into, you've got business pressures, you've got competing priorities. You need to ensure that you hire the right expertise and skill set. There's only so much time that you can dedicate trying to unearth the right candidate pool to hit that diversity sort of objective that you have either personally or organizationally set for yourself. So I do think there are some systematic challenges that are still there, and that impacts the pipeline of talent. And that goes right down into, actually, do we have enough of that diversity coming in out of either university or apprenticeships that are actually coming into financial services and then move through the ranks? I mean, even before diversity became rightfully the topic that it is today, when I joined on the grad scheme and the more junior roles, it was a very diverse pool. Now, maybe that's a reflection of the organisation, fantastic, but certainly that then dropped off very significantly several years later.
Yeah. Why do you think that might have been? Just curiosity.
I think a lot of it is, I guess, really showing my grey hairs a little bit. I think there was a lack of sort of work-life balance, flexibility. There was certainly external pressures, certainly on the female side. And I do think that then led and is bleeding into and pulling people all the way through the organisation and to really inspire them to keep going and push through what I'd call junior to mid-layer and above. I think, yes, mentorship can help, and yes, having greater flexibility can help, but actually there's a degree of being cognizant that there is that career that will take you beyond what you're doing today. And a lot of it is, okay, well, whatever it is that I'm doing today, think about where you'd like to be, not necessarily in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but what skill set do you want to be acquiring, and how do you go about the acquisition of that skill set and expertise to drive yourself forward? And I think a lot of it is encouraging people to believe in themselves, because whenever I speak to various younger talent, number one thing is people question themselves all the time, especially if they look around the room and they don't see very many people that they can mirror themselves in.
I completely agree.
Now, I always think of that as a strength. A lot of the times people would think that that is a disadvantage, and therefore they don't believe in themselves. And I can say a lot of the times when you're in the room, the individual that is questioning themselves is 9 times out of 10 the better candidate, the one that's got more talent, more experience, and has just not found that voice to bring that to the table, versus the person that is loudest in the room.
You make a lot of very valid points there. Something we see day in, day out, week in, week out, quite honestly. It might be quite prudent to ask you now then, Veronika, what piece of advice or words of wisdom would you give to younger talent, younger females perhaps? What would that be for you?
So I'd probably say, don't think necessarily in sort of job titles, and think more on what skills are you going to pick up, what sort of individuals are you going to be working with, and what exposure is that going to give you in your day-to-day job. And you will be amazed that how valuable the network that you actually start to developing from day one, how critical that is, and how, I guess, enhancing and supporting that can be as you progress through your career. People used to say that to me all the time, that, start to develop a network, think about it. And I remember thinking, well, London's huge. I mean, will you really bump into somebody in 2 to 3 years' time? Actually, a lot of industries are very close-knit. A lot of people know each other. So the faster you start to push yourself to develop that network and take leaps, and when I say leaps, it doesn't have to be a wholesale career change. It's more about believing yourself, start to be a little bit more open-minded, and just think through, okay, what am I going to learn? Who am I going to work with? Who could I possibly meet through that environment? And what does that mean in my next step? And what is that going to sort of put into what I say the wheelhouse? Because actually, when I look back, I started in structuring to then move into working on developing a lending business is not necessarily a very linear career progression. And that's also quite an important thing to take away. Don't think in a linear fashion, because sometimes that could actually, if you just look on the linear fashion, you will miss the vast number of opportunities that are very much there.
Veronika, as well, you mentioned an interesting point around mentors. So I just wanted to delve into your experience of mentors that you have had, or perhaps you've mentored other people. What impact that has had on you?
Sure. Probably say that whilst I've always had mentors on and off through my career, it's only really in the last couple of years that I've found the right mentorship support, and B, really realised actually how powerful that is. And so arguably I think that's a mistake on my part. So I would absolutely encourage and support and really sort of always say to people, ensure that you think about a mentor. It doesn't have to be one. What I would actually say is that having several individuals, and it doesn't have to be in a formal mentorship capacity, it's about having a handful of individuals that will challenge you in a way that you feel comfortable, will really push you to think differently, and also ensure that you are not closing yourself off through your own thought process. So in short, I do now have several mentors, and they've been absolutely critical, especially when I've been going through a period of vast organizational change of business direction, vision, or challenges. And actually, you can fall into the sentiment that mentors are great when you're going through a bit of a tough time. They're actually even more powerful when you think that it's all looking fantastic, because as you develop that relationship with them, they will know your blind spots. The one thing that I would say is when you're thinking about a mentor is just ensure that you can build up great rapport with them, and they really understand you, and you're also very honest with them. I had a really powerful conversation with one of my mentors very recently, and they said to me, it's really important to also understand what's happening in your personal life as well as your professional life, because the two are just intrinsically linked. So and I think previously, certainly when I was younger, I would only walk into any sort of mentor style discussions with a specific business problem or a specific question that I'd have. And you should be going to that to a line manager or a business support. Actually, mentors are there, or in my opinion, for a slightly different set. They're there. They are the champion for you, for your goals.
Very
holistically. So, some people say, is that a life coach? Is that a mentor? I think at times it can almost blend between the two. It's ensuring that they can keep you on the track that's important to you.
Yeah. And just very briefly, like personally and professionally, as you've mentioned, how do you feel you balance that? Being a parent and, being a chief strategy officer in a very senior leadership role. How do you handle it?
So I've only just sort of stepped into motherhood. I've got a 20-month-old son. Thank you. That means I slept 21 months ago. That I certainly have not got it right. I remember everybody talking about the guilt, the challenge, the competing priorities, and I can say that is wholeheartedly true. You never feel like any job is done. I think like any mother would appreciate, your job is never done. You're always on. The one thing that it has been good for me to do is actually, I certainly had tendencies to be a little bit more of a workaholic at times and not know when to switch off. When you have children or something else happens in your personal life, it doesn't necessarily have to be children, that just pushes you to switch off, whether you like it or not. Work has to stop and your personal priority has to come in and take effect. And it's almost, it just happens. That's probably the only way I can describe it. So my child needs to be fed, he needs to be put to bed, whether I like it or not, I have to stop working. And so from that perspective, it's actually been good for me to really start to learn how to balance that work-life position slightly better. I'm sure my husband will say I'm worse now, but I think I'm getting better.
I think sometimes that's a really valid point. You do need, I'm probably guilty of not doing it enough, but you do need that, and the priorities will be prioritized when you see fit. So very, very valid point there, Veronika.
I think it also teaches you to be even more efficient. So it's all about highly effective prioritization and ensuring that you're efficient in every minute of your day.
It'd be interesting to share diaries and looking at them. I do want to just briefly as well, when we're talking about managing these senior leadership roles, and clearly you've testament to you've done remarkably well. If you could elaborate a little bit more on that leadership style for the purpose of what you do with your team and really bringing the best out of them.
Yeah, sure. So I think I mentioned before, I can be a fairly direct person. So what I've actually been working on and sort of been honing in on is I really focus on ensuring that I'm not dictatorial. That's it. And it's everything comes back to ensuring that I bring people along on the journey. So when I think about what style I bring to the table, I always try and sort of look in the mirror and think back on actually the leaders that I've seen and thought were not necessarily doing the best job.
So learning the good and the not so.
Yeah, so it's about actually bringing what I think wasn't necessarily the best style, characteristics of approach, and trying to put that into my, dare I say, wheelhouse. So I'd like to think I am collaborative individual. I do give clear direction. I'm decisive. And I think that is important because ultimately people will look to their leaders to make a decision and to some extent set the tone.
Yeah.
But then also ensure that I can give people the freedom that they need to get on with the job and feel empowered and also feel backed. It's really important that your team know that you're there to support them no matter what. If they get things wrong, that's fine, let's fix it together. And ensure you've got a constant open line with every single member, both with your team, but also everybody around you, so people can feel that they can come and talk to you.
Yeah. I think some very good traits there, ones that I am certainly reflecting back on, I think, a little bit. But thank you for sharing your journey and your successes today. It's been really, really good to get to know you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.